Part 1. The Diplomatic Mission. The stars looked different from Valora Prime. Jinho pressed his hand against the viewport of the landing bay and stared at the swirling purple nebula that dominated the sky. He had traveled 3 months through space to reach this world, and now that he stood on alien ground, everything felt surreal. "Stop staring and move," Taewon said, bumping his shoulder. "The delegation is waiting." Jinho grabbed his equipment case and followed his fellow crew member down the ramp. The Valoran palace stretched before them like a mountain made of crystal and silver. It caught the light of their orange sun and threw rainbows across the landing platform. Jinho had seen pictures, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. The Valorans themselves were even more striking. Tall and elegant, they moved like water flowing uphill. Their skin had a faint shimmer, and their bones seemed to glow beneath the surface. The welcoming committee stood in perfect formation, their faces showing polite disinterest. "Humans," one of them said, the translator device rendering his words in flat English. "Follow us. The Empress will grant you audience tomorrow. Today you rest." The humans were led through corridors that seemed to shift and change. Jinho realized the walls were alive somehow, responding to the presence of the Valorans who walked past. His engineering mind immediately started analyzing the technology. Back on Earth, they were still trying to figure out fusion reactors. These aliens had walls that thought. Their quarters were comfortable but clearly designed to remind them they were guests, not equals. The furniture was too tall, the lighting too bright, the air slightly too cold. Jinho didn't complain. He had volunteered for this mission, knowing it would be difficult. "They look down on us," Hyejin said that evening as the crew gathered in the common room. She was their xenobiologist, the one who had studied Valoran culture for 2 years before this trip. To them, we're children playing with fire. Their civilization is 8,000 years old. Ours barely made it to space 300 years ago. Then we show them what humans can do, Captain Deho said firmly. "We're here to build a bridge. It won't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever is." The next morning, Jinho was checking the environmental systems in their quarters when an alarm chimed. The air circulation had failed in one of the sleeping rooms. Taewon was already sweating, the temperature rising quickly. "I'll call for help," Hyejin said, reaching for the communication panel. "Wait." Jinho opened his equipment case and pulled out a portable scanner. "Let me look first." He found the problem in 10 minutes. The Valoran system was incredibly advanced, but it relied on biological sensors that didn't recognize human life signs properly. The system thought the room was empty and had shut down. Jinho bypassed the sensor with a simple relay circuit he built from spare parts. Cool air rushed back into the room. Taewon sighed with relief. "Crude, but effective," a voice said from the doorway. Jinho turned and saw a Valoran woman watching him. She was younger than the others he had met, and her eyes held curiosity instead of disdain. She wore robes marked with silver threads that indicated high rank. "I am Nari," she said. "Youngest daughter of Empress Mirai. I heard there was a problem and came to see if you needed assistance." "We're fine now, Your Highness," Jinho said, bowing slightly. He wasn't sure of the proper protocol. "Just a small technical issue." Nari stepped closer and examined his makeshift repair. "You fixed our system with that?" "It's a relay circuit. Basic but reliable. Sometimes simple solutions work best." For the first time since arriving, Jinho saw a Valoran smile. It was small and quickly hidden, but it was there. "What is your name?" she asked. "Lieutenant Commander Park Jinho, Your Highness. I'm an engineer." "An engineer who thinks simply?" Nari touched the circuit with one long finger. "Our people have forgotten simplicity. We make everything complex because we can. Perhaps that is not always wisdom." Over the next 3 weeks, Jinho saw Nari several more times. She seemed to appear wherever the humans were working, always with questions. She asked about Earth, about human history, about why they wanted to reach the stars so badly. "Because we had to," Jinho explained one afternoon. They were in one of the palace gardens, a place where crystalline trees grew in geometric patterns. Earth was dying. We had wars, pollution, disease. We fixed our world, but we learned something important. We learned that staying in one place meant death. We had to grow, or die. We have never faced such a choice, Nari said softly. Valora has always been peaceful, always abundant. Perhaps that is why we have stopped growing. The diplomatic talks were not going well. The Valoran nobles saw no reason to trade with humans. What could Earth offer that Valora did not already have? The human delegation argued for cooperation, for shared knowledge, for friendship between species. The Valorans listened with patient condescension. They'll never agree, Taewon said one night. We're wasting our time. But Jinho had noticed something. Every session there was one noble who seemed thoughtful rather than dismissive. Lord Sunwoo sat in the back and took careful notes. After one particularly frustrating meeting, Sunwoo approached Jinho. You fixed the princess's private study last week, Sunwoo said. The lighting system was malfunctioning. She asked for help. I was glad to give it. She speaks of you often. Sunwoo's eyes were unreadable. She says you see problems differently than we do, that you find elegant solutions in crude methods. I do my best. There are some among us who see value in what humans offer, Sunwoo continued. But there are others who see only threats. Be careful, Engineer Park. The palace has many eyes and not all of them are friendly. That night Jinho couldn't sleep. He stood at his window looking out at the alien city below. Somewhere in that crystalline maze people were plotting. The Sovereignty, Heejin had explained, was a radical group that wanted to keep Valora pure. They hated the idea of alien contact. Jinho had noticed security gaps during the ceremonial events he attended. Guards who looked away at wrong moments. Doors left unsealed. Small things that his engineering mind cataloged automatically. He told himself he was being paranoid. But when Nari visited the next morning with more questions about human music, Jinho found himself wondering. If something happened, if someone wanted to hurt the royal family, would anyone be ready? Would anyone care about a princess who was too curious about aliens? He pushed the thoughts away and showed Nari a recording of jazz music from old Earth. She listened with wonder, her head tilting like a bird. It sounds like chaos, she said, but there is order underneath. How strange. How beautiful. That's humanity for you, Jinho said with a smile. Chaos with purpose. Neither of them knew that in 3 days everything would change. Neither of them knew that chaos was coming, and only crude, simple human thinking would stand between life and death. Part 2. The growing bond 3 weeks passed on Valora Prime, and Jinho found himself falling into a strange routine. Mornings were spent in diplomatic meetings that went nowhere. Afternoons were for maintenance work and reports. But evenings belonged to unexpected conversations with a curious princess. Nari came to the human quarters almost every day now. At first, other Valorans whispered about it. A princess spending time with aliens was unusual, but Nari didn't seem to care what others thought, and gradually people stopped paying attention. They assumed she was studying the humans like one might study interesting insects. They were wrong. Nari was learning what it meant to be human. Tell me about coffee again, she said one evening. They sat in the garden where crystalline trees hummed with internal energy. Jinho had brought a thermos of the precious beverage, rationed carefully from Earth supplies. It's a drink made from roasted beans, Jinho explained. It tastes bitter, gives you energy, and humans have been addicted to it for centuries. Why drink something bitter? Because sometimes bitter things wake you up. They remind you that you're alive. He poured a small amount into the thermos cap and offered it to her. Want to try? Nari took the cup carefully. Valorans rarely shared food or drink, even among themselves. She sipped and immediately made a face that would have been funny if it wasn't so genuine. This is terrible, she said. Jinho laughed. Yes, it is. But drink it every morning for a week and you'll understand. Humans are very strange. But she took another sip anyway. These conversations became Jinho's favorite part of each day. Nari asked endless questions. She wanted to know everything about Earth, about human history, about the wars and struggles and triumphs. Jinho found himself telling her stories he hadn't thought about in years. My grandmother lived through the water wars, he said one night. 50 years ago, when half of Asia was fighting over rivers and lakes. Millions died, but we learned from it. We learned to work together or die separately. We have never had such struggles, Nari admitted. Valora has always provided. We have never known scarcity. Maybe that's why you don't understand us, Jinho said carefully. We're shaped by our limitations. We innovate because we have to, not because we want to. Nari was quiet for a long moment. My mother says limitations are for lesser species, that Valorans are above such things. Everyone has limitations. The question is what you do with them. That seemed to strike something in Nari. She looked at him with those strange, luminous eyes. You see the universe differently than we do. We see what is. You see what could be. We have to. If we only saw what is, we'd still be stuck on Earth, slowly dying. But it wasn't just philosophy they discussed. Jinho introduced Nari to human music, starting with jazz and moving through rock, classical, and folk songs. She was fascinated by the emotion in human voices, the way music could carry feeling across space and time. We have music, she said, but it is mathematical. Perfect harmonies calculated for maximum aesthetic pleasure. Your music is messy. The best things usually are. Jinho also learned about Valora. Nari showed him historical archives, 8,000 years of unbroken civilization. He saw the rise of the empire, the slow expansion to 12 star systems, the careful cultivation of beauty and order. It was impressive, but Jinho noticed something. You haven't changed much in the last 2,000 years, he observed, studying a timeline. Why would we? We achieve perfection. Nothing is perfect. Everything can improve, Nari frowned. It was clear this idea troubled her. She had been raised to believe Valoran society was the pinnacle of civilization. The thought that it might be stagnant was disturbing. Meanwhile, the diplomatic talks continued to fail. Captain Deho tried every approach, but the Valoran Council remained unmoved. They saw no benefit in human partnership. Some were openly hostile. The sovereignty had sympathizers even in the government, and they made their feelings clear. These creatures will contaminate our culture, one noble declared during a session. They are violent, short-lived, and primitive. We have nothing to gain from association with them. We have survived everything the universe threw at us, Hyejin countered. We're still here, still fighting, still growing. That means something. It means you are too stubborn to accept your limitations. The meeting ended badly, as most of them did. But there was one ally. Lord Sunwoo invited the human delegation to a private dinner. It was the first time Valorans had shared a meal with them, and Jinho understood the significance. Breaking bread together was universal. There are more of us than you think, Sunwoo said quietly. Valorans who believe stagnation is death. We see what you've accomplished in 3 centuries, and wonder what we might have done with our 8,000 years if we had your drive. You see the sovereignty growing too, Taewon said. It wasn't a question. Sunwoo nodded slowly. They are vocal and they are organized. They believe alien contact will destroy Valoran purity. Some are merely conservative. Others are more extreme. How extreme? Jinho asked. Extreme enough to worry about. Sunwoo looked at each of them. The Festival of Celestial Light is in 3 days. It celebrates 500 years of Empress Mirai's reign. Security will be heavy, but crowds make even the best security imperfect. Be watchful. After dinner, Jinho walked in the palace gardens alone. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was building. The security gaps he had noticed weren't accidents. Someone was preparing for something. He found Nari sitting by a fountain that flowed upward, water climbing toward artificial stars in the ceiling. You're troubled, she said without looking at him. I'm worried about the festival. Don't be. We've had such celebrations for millennia. Nothing has ever gone wrong. That's exactly why something might go wrong now. People get comfortable. They stop being careful. Nari turned to face him. You think someone would attack during the festival? I think it would be the perfect opportunity for someone who wanted to make a statement. The sovereignty, Nari said softly. You think they would be so bold? I think people who believe strongly enough will do anything. Jinho sat down beside her. On Earth, we learned that lesson the hard way. Many times. Nari was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, I have spent these weeks learning about humanity, about your struggles and your strength. I have seen how you solve problems with simple tools and clear thinking. My mother says humans are primitive, but I think you see truths we have forgotten. What truths? That peace is not the absence of danger. That safety is not the same as being unprepared. That limitations teach us to be strong. She looked at him directly. You are afraid for us. Yes, Jinho admitted. I am. That is strange. We are the advanced civilization. We should be protecting you. Protection isn't about technology. It's about being willing to stand between danger and what you care about. Nari smiled sadly. 3 weeks ago, I would have laughed at such primitive thinking. Now I wonder if we Velerans have forgotten how to stand at all. We have been sitting on our thrones for so long. The next 2 days blurred together. Jinho tried to convince Captain Deho to increase security protocols. Taewon ran additional drills with their small security team. Heejin dug through every piece of intelligence they had on the sovereignty. They found nothing concrete. Just rumors and whispers and the feeling that something was wrong. On the night before the festival, Jinho couldn't sleep. He stood at his window and watched Valora's twin moons rise over the Crystal City. Somewhere out there, people were making final preparations. Some for celebration, others for something darker. Jinho thought about his family back on Earth. His parents in Busan, his sister Yuna, who wanted to be an engineer like him. He had left them to come here, to try building bridges between worlds. It had seemed important. It still seemed important. But now he wondered if he would live to see those bridges completed. He pushed the thought away. Tomorrow was the Festival of Celestial Light. Tomorrow the Empress would address her people. Tomorrow, humanity would stand as honored guests before the Valoran Empire. Tomorrow, everything would change. Part 3. The Festival of Celestial Light. The Crystal Gardens looked like something from a dream. Thousands of Velerans filled the open amphitheater, their formal robes shimmering in the light of the orange sun. The gardens themselves seemed alive, with crystalline trees that sang soft harmonies and pathways that glowed beneath every step. At the center of it all stood the Radiance platform, elevated 15 meters above the crowd, where the royal family would appear. Jinho stood with the human delegation in a section reserved for honored guests. They were close to the platform, closer than most Velerans. It should have felt like a privilege. Instead, it felt exposed. Relax, Taewon muttered beside him. You look like you're expecting an attack. I am expecting an attack. Security is everywhere. Look around. Jinho had been looking. He saw palace guards in their ceremonial armor, positioned at regular intervals throughout the gardens. He saw scanning devices at every entrance. He saw drones floating overhead, their sensors sweeping the crowd constantly. It looked secure, but he also saw the gaps. Guards focused on the crowd, not on each other. Sensors calibrated for Valoran technology, not for whatever weapons humans might have developed. Drones following preset patterns that anyone with half a brain could predict. Something feels wrong, Jinho said quietly. Heejin leaned over. Your instincts have been good so far. What specifically worries you? Everything, nothing, I don't know. Jinho scanned the crowd again. It's too perfect, too organized, like a stage set. Before anyone could respond, trumpets sounded. The crowd fell silent instantly. Every Veleran turned toward the Radiance platform as one. Their movements synchronized in a way that reminded Jinho how different their culture really was. Empress Mirai appeared first, materializing on the platform through some transport technology Jinho didn't understand. She was magnificent, tall and regal, her robes cascading around her like frozen light. The other members of the royal family appeared beside her one by one. Nari was last, and Jinho noticed she looked nervous. Their eyes met across the distance. Nari gave a small nod. The Empress began her speech. The translator device in Jinho's ear rendered her words in English. But even without understanding the language, he would have known this was important. 500 years of rule, 8,000 years of unbroken civilization, the glory of the Valoran Empire and its eternal place among the stars. Jinho tried to focus on the speech, but his attention kept wandering. He watched the crowd, the guards, the shadows between the crystal trees. His engineering mind cataloged sightlines, escape routes, structural weaknesses. He couldn't help it. Something was going to happen. He could feel it. 20 minutes into the speech it began. The first explosion came from the eastern perimeter. Not large but loud enough to shatter the perfect silence. Screams erupted from that section of the crowd. Guards rushed toward the noise. It's a distraction, Jinho said, grabbing Taewon's arm. Look at the platform. He had seen it. A flicker of movement in the shadows beneath the platform. Figures dressed in dark clothing, carrying equipment that definitely wasn't ceremonial. They had been hiding there the whole time, waiting. The second explosion was bigger. The western gardens erupted in flames and smoke. More screams. More guards rushing away from the platform. The crowd started to panic, pushing toward the exits. Sovereignty. Hyejin breathed. They're attacking. The third explosion took out the main security station. Suddenly, the drones fell from the sky, their control system severed. Half the guards' communication went dead. The attack had been planned perfectly, each step designed to strip away layers of defense. Figures burst from beneath the platform, attackers wearing stolen guard uniforms. They had weapons, compact but clearly powerful. They fired into the air and energy beams cut through crystal trees like they were paper. The crowd scattered in terror. On the platform, the royal family stood frozen. Empress Mireille's guards formed a protective circle, but they were outnumbered. More attackers appeared from everywhere at once. They had been hidden throughout the gardens waiting for the signal. "We need to move," Captain Diho shouted. "Back to the ship now." But Jinho wasn't listening. He was watching the platform, watching an attacker climb the support structure with a rifle slung across his back, watching him reach a position where he had a clear shot, watching him raise the weapon and aim it at the royal family, not at Empress Mireille. At Nari. Time seemed to slow down. Jinho's mind processed information with crystal clarity. The weapon was a graviton disruptor, capable of tearing a person apart at the molecular level. Range approximately 50 meters. Time to fire less than 3 seconds. Angle of attack 30 degrees above horizontal. Target Princess Nari standing slightly apart from the others. Distance from Jinho to the platform 12 meters. Obstacles none. Time to reach Nari if he ran at full speed. Approximately 4 seconds. The math didn't work. He would be too late, unless he didn't stop running when he reached the platform, unless he used his momentum to crash into Nari and push her out of the way, unless he was willing to fall 15 meters to the garden floor below. "Jinho, no!" Taewon's voice seemed to come from very far away. Jinho was already running. His boots pounded on the crystalline ground. Palace guards shouted at him, thinking he was another attacker. He didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The platform grew larger with each step. He saw Nari turn toward him, confusion on her face. He saw the attacker squeeze the trigger. Jinho reached the platform and leaped. His body cleared the railing. His arms wrapped around Nari. His momentum carried them both sideways off the platform into empty air. The graviton beam screamed past them, missing Nari by centimeters. It struck the ancient throne behind where she had been standing. The throne, carved from a single massive crystal and 800 years old, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. The next only dust remained. Then Jinho and Nari were falling. 15 meters is not far in space terms, but it's plenty of distance to reach fatal velocity. Jinho had 1 second, maybe 2, to make a choice. He twisted in midair using every bit of his training and positioned himself beneath Nari, his back toward the ground, her weight pressing down on his chest. "I'm sorry," he thought, though he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. To his family, maybe. To the mission. To the bridges he wouldn't get to build. They hit the ground hard. Jinho's body absorbed the impact. He felt things break inside him, important things. His spine compressed. His ribs shattered. His left lung collapsed. Pain exploded through every nerve, so intense it went beyond pain into something else entirely. Nari rolled off him, gasping but alive. She had minor cuts and bruises, nothing serious. Jinho's body had cushioned her fall completely. Above them, the battle continued. Guards were overwhelming the attackers now, fighting with lethal efficiency. The coup had failed. The sovereignty had gambled everything on this moment and lost. But Jinho barely registered any of it. He tried to breathe and couldn't, tried to move and couldn't. His body wouldn't respond. Blood filled his mouth. The orange sun above looked dim, like it was moving farther away. Faces appeared above him. Taewon, tears streaming down his face. Hyejin shouting for medical help. Nari, her hands pressed against his chest as if she could hold his life inside him through sheer will. "Stay with us," Taewon begged. "Please, Jinho, stay with us." Jinho tried to speak. It took 3 attempts. Finally, words came out, barely a whisper. "Is she safe?" "Yes," Nari said, her voice breaking. "I'm safe. Because of you." "Good." Jinho managed something like a smile. "Worth it." Then the world went dark and he fell into a different kind of void. One without stars, without light, without the sound of his friend crying over him. Medical teams rushed in with equipment. They lifted Jinho onto a stretcher, moving with desperate speed. His vital signs were crashing. His body was shutting down, but he was still alive, still fighting, still holding on with the same stubborn determination that had carried humanity to the stars. The battle ended within minutes. 17 Valorans lay dead, including 2 minor nobles. All the attackers were killed or captured. The sovereignty's carefully planned coup had crumbled in the face of palace guards who, despite their ceremonial appearance, remembered how to fight. But Jinho didn't see any of it. He was already being rushed to the medical facility, his crewmates running beside the stretcher, refusing to leave him. Nari followed, ignoring the chaos around her, ignoring her own mother calling her name. She had seen a human do the impossible. She had seen someone choose to die so that she might live, and she didn't understand it at all. Valorans didn't think that way. Self-preservation was logical. Sacrifice was not. But as she ran through the crystal corridors following the stretcher that carried a dying human, Nari realized something. Logic wasn't everything. Math couldn't explain why her chest hurt when she looked at Jinho's broken body. Numbers couldn't capture what she had just witnessed. Perhaps humans understood something Valorans had forgotten. Perhaps that was why they had survived their harsh world. Perhaps that was what made them strong. Nari followed Jinho into the medical facility, and in that moment everything she thought she knew about the universe changed forever. Part 4. The Aftermath. The medical facility hummed with technology far beyond anything on Earth. Machines that could regenerate tissue, scanners that could see every cell, treatments that seemed like magic. But none of it was designed for human biology. The Valoran doctors worked frantically, consulting databases, improvising, trying to understand the strange alien body dying on their table. Hyejin stood in the observation room, shouting instructions through the communication system. She had studied xenobiology, but her knowledge was theoretical. Now she watched helplessly as doctors tried to save her friend with techniques that might kill him faster. His spine is fractured in 7 places, one doctor reported. Multiple organs are hemorrhaging. The skeletal structure is different from ours, weaker. How do humans survive at all? They survive because they're stubborn, Hyejin said, her voice shaking. Please, you have to save him. Taewon paced the observation room like a caged animal. His hands were clenched into fists. His face was wet with tears he didn't bother wiping away. Captain Daeho sat in the corner, his head in his hands, looking older than his years. In the medical bay, Jinho's body fought a battle it was losing. His heart rate kept dropping. His blood pressure crashed twice and had to be stabilized with medications the doctors barely understood. His collapsed lung wouldn't reinflate. Every time they fixed one problem, 2 more appeared. We're losing him, a doctor said quietly. No, Nari said from the doorway. Everyone turned. The princess stood there, still wearing her festival robes, now stained with Jinho's blood. You will not let him die. Use every resource we have. I don't care what it costs. Your Highness, human physiology is too different. Our technology isn't compatible. Then make it compatible. Adapt, improvise, isn't that what he would do? Nari walked to the observation window and pressed her hand against the glass. He saved my life. The least we can do is try to save his. The doctors went back to work with renewed determination. They brought in human medical data from Earth databases. They modified Valoran techniques. They tried things that had never been attempted before, mixing 2 species' medical knowledge in desperate combinations. Hours passed. The human delegation maintained their vigil in the observation room. Other crew members from the ship arrived, filling the space with quiet grief. No one spoke much. They just watched and waited and hoped. Outside the medical facility, news of the attack spread across Valora Prime. The sovereignty's coup had failed, but the cost was clear. 17 dead, dozens injured, the ancient throne destroyed. And a human, an alien they barely knew, had sacrificed himself to save their princess. The story spread like wildfire. Valorans who had dismissed humans as primitive suddenly had to face uncomfortable questions. Would any of them have done what Jinho did? Would they have chosen death to save another? The answer for most was no. Self-preservation was logical. What Jinho had done was not logical at all, and yet somehow it felt right. Empress Mirai came to the medical facility that evening. She swept into the observation room with her guards, every inch the powerful ruler. But when she saw Jinho's broken body through the window, something in her face changed. He did this for my daughter. she said softly. Yes, Empress, Captain Deho replied, standing to bow. Why? He barely knows her. Because that's what humans do. We protect people who need protecting. It doesn't matter if we barely know them. Mireille was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, I have ruled for 500 years. I have seen wars and peace, triumph and tragedy, but I have never seen anything like this. Tell me about him. About Park Jin-ho, so they told her. About Jin-ho's childhood in Busan, growing up by the sea. About his parents, Sang-woo and Eunji, who worked hard so their children could reach for the stars. About his sister, Yuna, who idolized him and wanted to be an engineer just like her big brother. About his first assignment on a mining station, where he saved 6 people by repairing a failing life support system, with nothing but spare parts and determination. They told her about his laugh, his terrible jokes, his habit of humming old Earth songs while he worked. They told her about a man who saw problems and fixed them, who saw people in danger and helped them, who saw a princess about to die and didn't hesitate. He is ordinary, Captain Deho said. That's what makes this extraordinary. He's not a hero from stories. He's just a good man who did what needed to be done. Mireille listened to it all. Then she walked to the window and looked down at Jin-ho. If he survives, she said, I will ensure he receives every honor our empire can bestow. And if he doesn't, she paused. If he doesn't, I will ensure his name is never forgotten. Inside the medical bay, Jin-ho's condition stabilized slightly. Not much, but enough to give hope. The doctors worked through the night, fighting for every breath, every heartbeat. Valoran technology kept him alive. Human stubbornness kept him fighting. Nari refused to leave. She stood in the corner of the medical bay, watching everything. The doctors had tried to make her go, but one look at her face told them it was useless. So they let her stay. This princess who had never seen suffering before, who was now witnessing the cost of her salvation. She learned everything she could about Jin-ho. She accessed Earth databases and read about his life. She found pictures of his family, his home, the blue planet he came from. She studied human culture, trying to understand what created someone like him. She discovered the concept of Hongik Ingan, an old Korean idea meaning to broadly benefit humanity. She read about human history, about countless people who had sacrificed themselves for others, soldiers who jumped on grenades to save their friends, firefighters who ran into burning buildings, parents who gave everything for their children. Humans did this, not occasionally, not rarely. They did it over and over throughout their history. They chose others over themselves again and again, in big ways and small ways. It was woven into their culture, their stories, their understanding of what made life meaningful. Valorans didn't have stories like that. They had tales of clever leaders and strategic victories. They had legends of artists and philosophers. But they didn't have stories about people who willingly died for strangers. We have lost something, Nari whispered to herself in the darkness of the medical bay. Somewhere in our 8,000 years, we forgot what it means to put others first. On the second day, Jin-ho regained consciousness briefly. His eyes opened, unfocused and confused. Taewon was beside him instantly. Hey, buddy. You're okay? You're safe. Jin-ho's lips moved. It took several tries before sound came out. Nari, she's safe. You saved her. A ghost of a smile crossed Jin-ho's face. Good. You need to rest now. Save your strength. Tell them. Jin-ho's voice faded. Tell my family. I'm sorry. You tell them yourself when you recover. But Jin-ho's eyes had already closed again. He slipped back into unconsciousness, and the machines showed his condition worsening once more. The doctors conferred in worried tones. They had done everything possible, but Jin-ho's body couldn't take much more. The damage was too severe. Human physiology wasn't as resilient as Valoran. What would merely injure a Valoran was killing Jin-ho. How long does he have? Hyejin asked, her voice hollow. The senior doctor looked at her with something like pity. Days, maybe a week if we're fortunate. I'm sorry. We've tried everything. News reached the rest of the human crew. They came in shifts to say goodbye, telling stories about Jin-ho, sharing memories. Some cried openly. Others held their grief inside, stoic and silent. But they all came because Jin-ho would have come for any of them. Back on Earth, Jin-ho's family received the news. His parents held each other and wept. His sister Yuna stared at his picture, unable to believe her brother was dying light years away. Messages poured in from Earth, from people who had never met Jin-ho but had heard his story. Messages of support, of admiration, of grief. The story spread beyond Valora Prime. Other star systems heard about the human who saved an alien princess. Some dismissed it as propaganda. Others felt something stir inside them, something they couldn't quite name. In the medical bay, Nari stood by Jinho's bedside. She reached out and took his hand, breaking another Valoran custom. Physical contact with aliens was considered improper. She didn't care. "I don't understand you," she said softly. "You knew you would die. The math was clear. You could have stayed safe, but you ran toward danger instead. Why, for someone you barely knew? For someone who wasn't even your species?" Jinho couldn't answer. He lay still, his breathing shallow, machines keeping him alive. "I will find out," Nari promised. "I will learn what made you do this, and I will make sure your sacrifice means something. I swear it on my name and my crown. You will not be forgotten, Park Jinho. I will not allow it." Outside, Valora's twin moons rose over the crystal city. Inside, a human engineer fought the final battle of his life, surrounded by aliens who were beginning to understand that perhaps they had something to learn from these strange, fragile, impossibly brave creatures from Earth. Part 5. The vigil 8 days passed in a strange limbo between hope and despair. Jinho hovered in that gray space between life and death, too stubborn to give up but too broken to recover. The medical bay became a place of silent waiting, where humans and Velerans alike kept watch over a dying man. The crew rotated shifts. Someone was always with Jinho, talking to him even though he couldn't respond. They told him stories about Earth, about home, about all the things waiting for him when he recovered. They spoke as if recovery was certain because the alternative was too terrible to say aloud. Taewon took the longest shifts. He barely slept, barely ate. Guilt consumed him like acid. He replayed the festival over and over in his mind, looking for the moment where he could have acted differently, if he had been faster, if he had seen the threat earlier, if he had grabbed Jinho before he could run. "It should have been me," he said one night, his voice cracking. "I'm security. Protecting people is my job." He was just an engineer. "He was your friend," Hyejin said gently. "That made it his job too. Friends don't let friends die. Friends honor the choices their friends make. Jinho chose this. You can't take that away from him." But words couldn't ease the weight on Taewon's chest. He sat by Jinho's bedside and held his hand, whispering apologies that would never be heard. News of Jinho's condition spread throughout human space. On Earth, vigils were held in cities across the planet. Strangers gathered to light candles for a man they had never met. School children learned his name and drew pictures of a hero saving a princess. The story was simple enough for them to understand and profound enough to matter. Messages flooded in from across the coalition. Other crews shared their own stories of Jinho. The time he fixed a communications relay while hanging in open space during a meteor storm. The time he jury-rigged a solution that saved a colony ship's failing reactor. The time he stayed up for 36 hours straight, teaching a new engineer the fundamentals of their job. He had been everywhere, touched so many lives in small ways. Now all those small kindnesses added up to something larger. People realized they knew someone who had been helped by Jinho. The network of his quiet good deeds spread further than anyone had imagined. He would be embarrassed by all this attention, Captain Daeho said, reading through the messages. He never wanted to be special. Too late for that now, Hyejin replied. On Valora Prime, something unexpected was happening. The attack had shaken the planet's certainty. Velerans had believed themselves superior, untouchable. The sovereignty had proven them wrong on both counts. Now they were forced to confront uncomfortable truths. And at the center of those truths was Jinho. Velerans came to the medical facility, wanting to see the human who had saved their princess. Security had to turn them away. But they left offerings outside. Crystalline flowers, musical recordings, written messages in careful translations. Expressions of gratitude in a culture that rarely thanked anyone for anything. Lord Sunwoo visited regularly. He sat in the observation room and watched Jinho's machines beep and hiss. In all our history, he said one day, I cannot find a single instance of someone sacrificing themselves for royalty the way this human did. We have tales of guards dying in battle, yes, but this was different. He had no duty to us, no obligation. He acted purely from... Sunwoo paused, searching for the word. From goodness. I am not sure we have a concept for that anymore. The diplomatic situation had transformed overnight. The same nobles who had dismissed humans as worthless now spoke of alliance with reverence. The sovereignty's attack had been meant to drive a wedge between species. Instead, it had welded them together in shared tragedy. But none of that mattered to Nari. She spent every free moment in the medical bay, studying Jinho as if he were a puzzle she could solve. She read everything about human culture she could find: philosophy, history, literature, music. She was trying to understand what created someone capable of what Jinho had done. She discovered that humans called it sacrifice, from ancient words meaning to make sacred. They elevated the act of giving up something precious for others. Their religions praised it. Their stories celebrated it. Their cultures honored it in 1,000 different ways. Velorans had no equivalent concept. They admired cleverness and efficiency. They valued achievement and beauty. But voluntary loss for another's gain? That was simply illogical. Perhaps logic isn't everything, Nari said aloud one night. She was alone with Jinho, the medical staff having stepped out briefly. Perhaps that's what we lost. In 8,000 years of perfection, we optimized away everything that made life meaningful. She looked at Jinho's face, peaceful in unconsciousness. He was younger than she had thought at first. Only 32 Earth years, less than half his species' average lifespan. And he had been willing to end it to save someone he barely knew. What drives humans to be this way? She wondered. Is it because your lives are short? Do you value them more because you have so little time? Or is it something deeper, something we had once and lost? The machines beeped steadily, the only answer she would receive. On the 5th day, Jinho's parents arrived from Earth. The journey took every favor Captain Deho could call in, pulling strings to get them transport on a fast courier ship. They rushed into the medical facility. Exhaustion and fear etched into their faces. Sangwoo stood at the observation window and looked at his son. His hand shook as he pressed it against the glass. Yoonji simply wept, soft broken sounds that cut through everyone present. Our Jinho, Sangwoo said, our boy. He was always like this. Always helping. Always fixing things for others. When he was 8, Yoonji said through tears, he found a bird with a broken wing. Spent 2 weeks caring for it, feeding it with an eyedropper, keeping it warm. When it healed and flew away, he cried because he would miss it. That's who he is. He can't not help. It's in his bones. They were allowed into the medical bay. Nari stepped back, giving them space. She watched as Jinho's mother took his hand and spoke to him in Korean, words Nari's translator didn't catch but didn't need to. The meaning was clear in every tone, every gesture. Please, Yoonji said to the doctors. Please save him. He's all we have. He's our everything. The doctors could only offer sympathy. They had done everything medically possible. Now it was up to Jinho's body, and human bodies were not designed to survive what he had endured. On the 7th day, Jinho's sister Yuna arrived. She was only 19, her eyes red from crying but her jaw set with determination. She went straight to her brother's bedside and took his hand. You idiot, she said, her voice fierce despite the tears. You big, stupid, heroic idiot. You can't die. I haven't become an engineer yet. You have to teach me everything you know. You promised, remember? You promised. For a moment, Jinho's fingers twitched. Everyone in the room froze. But it was just an involuntary muscle spasm. His eyes remained closed. Yuna talked to him for hours, telling him about Earth, about their neighborhood, about the garden their mother was planting. Normal things. Everyday things. Trying to anchor him to life with memories of home. Nari watched from the corner. She saw the way Jinho's family surrounded him with love, how they touched him without hesitation, how they spoke to him as if he could hear. Velorans didn't do this. When Velorans died, it was a private thing, dignified and distant. This was messy, raw, painful, and somehow more honest than anything Nari had ever experienced. Your brother is extraordinary, Nari said to Yuna during a quiet moment. No, Yuna said firmly. He's ordinary. That's what you don't understand. Humans like him are everywhere. People who help because they can. People who stand up because someone needs to. He's not special. He's just Jinho. But he was special, Nari thought. Maybe not by human standards, but by any objective measure. What he had done was remarkable. And if humans like him were truly common, then humanity itself was remarkable. On the 8th day, Jinho's condition began to deteriorate rapidly. His kidneys started failing. His heart struggled to maintain rhythm. The machines that kept him alive worked harder and harder, but even they had limits. The doctors called the family together. They were gentle but honest. Jinho's body had fought as long as it could. They could keep him alive on machines for a while longer, but he would never wake up, never recover. They could offer him a peaceful end now, surrounded by people who loved him, or they could delay the inevitable. Sangwoo and Yoonji held each other, making an impossible decision no parent should face. Yuna stood apart, shaking her head, refusing to accept it. Taewon punched the wall hard enough to crack the crystal surface. Hyejin walked out before anyone could see her break down completely. "How long?" Captain Daeho asked quietly. "Hours," the senior doctor replied. "Perhaps until morning if his body keeps fighting." Nari left the medical bay and walked through the empty corridors of the palace. She found herself in the Crystal Gardens, standing at the spot where Jinho had fallen. Someone had cleaned away the blood, but she could still see it in her mind. She looked up at the Radiance platform. 15 meters. Such a small distance in cosmic terms. A rounding error in astronomical calculations. But for one human, it had been everything. The distance between life and death. Between selfish survival and selfless sacrifice. "I don't know if you can hear me," Nari said to the empty air. "I don't know if humans have an afterlife like you believe." Part 6. The honor the morning Jinho died, Valora Prime fell silent. News spread through the Crystal City like a wave, and something unprecedented happened. Valorans stopped their morning routines. They stood still in the streets, in their homes, in their workplaces. They observed a moment of silence for an alien they had never met. It lasted exactly 3 minutes. No one organized it. No announcement was made. The entire planet simply stopped, united in grief for a human who had taught them something they had forgotten. In the medical bay, Jinho's family sat with his body. Yoonji held his hand and refused to let go. Sangwoo stood by the window, staring out at the alien city, his face carved from stone. Yuna curled in a chair, her grief too big for tears now. The human crew stood against the walls, witnesses to the end of an ordinary man who had done an extraordinary thing. Nari entered quietly. She had spent the night preparing herself, but nothing could have readied her for the reality of death. Jinho looked peaceful, but that peace was a lie. He was simply gone. The person who had laughed at her questions and shared his coffee and taught her about human music was erased from the universe. "I'm sorry," Nari said to his family. The words felt inadequate, too small for the enormity of the situation. "I'm so sorry." Yoonji looked up at her. The mother's eyes were swollen from crying, but they held no anger. "He saved you," she said simply. "That's what matters to him. That's all that would matter." "It's not enough. He shouldn't have had to die." "No," Sangwoo agreed. "But he did. And now we honor his choice by living well, by making his sacrifice mean something." The words were brave, but Nari could hear the breaking underneath them. This family had lost everything, and they were trying to find meaning in the ruins. It was the most human thing she had ever witnessed. Empress Mirai arrived with her full court. She entered the medical bay with a solemnity usually reserved for Valoran royalty. She stood before Jinho's body for a long moment, then turned to his family. "I am Empress Mirai, sovereign of Valora. Your son gave his life for my daughter. There are no words in our language sufficient to express what that means. But I can offer you this. He will be honored as no alien has been honored before. His name will live forever in our memory." She gestured, and her attendants brought forward a crystal tablet. On it was written text in both Valoran and Korean, declaring that Park Jinho would be inscribed in the Crystal Archive, the eternal record of Valoran history. His name would stand alongside their greatest heroes, preserved for as long as their civilization endured. "A state funeral will be held," Mirai continued. "If you wish it, he will lie in state in the Hall of Eternal Champions. Thousands will come to pay their respects. His story will be told to every child on Valora. He will be remembered." Sangwoo bowed deeply. "Thank you, Empress." Jinho would be humbled by this honor. "It is we who are humbled," Mirai replied. "Your son taught us something we had forgotten. He reminded us what true courage looks like." Preparations began immediately. The Hall of Eternal Champions was opened for the first time in 50 years. It was a vast space carved from a single massive crystal, its walls inscribed with the names of Valoran warriors and leaders stretching back millennia. Now it would hold a human engineer from Earth. Jinho's body was prepared with a mixture of human and Valoran customs. He was dressed in his coalition uniform, cleaned and repaired. Around his neck, they placed a crystal pendant engraved with the royal seal, marking him as a defender of the crown. His hands were folded across his chest, peaceful and still. They brought him to the hall as the sun set. The transition from medical bay to memorial was jarring. One moment he had been a patient connected to machines and monitors. Now he was a symbol, displayed for a planet to mourn. The viewing began at dawn. Nari expected hundreds. Thousands came. They lined up for hours, waiting patiently for their turn to walk past the human who had saved their princess. Many left offerings, crystal flowers, poems written in shaky translations, small tokens of respect. The pile grew until it surrounded Jinho's resting place like a garden. Velerans, who had dismissed humans as primitive, stood before Jinho and felt ashamed. They realized they had measured worth incorrectly. Technology and longevity didn't make someone valuable. Character did, choices did, and Jinho's final choice had been perfect. Children came with their parents asking questions in whispered voices. Why did he do it? Because he was brave. But why didn't he run away? Because someone needed help. But he died. Yes, but the princess lived. The children processed this with the clarity of youth, understanding in simple terms what their elders struggled with in complex ones. The human delegation from Earth arrived on the third day. Ships from across coalition space brought representatives, dignitaries, and ordinary people who wanted to say goodbye. The viewing had to be extended to accommodate everyone. Jinho lay in state for 7 days, and the line never ended. His crew stood honor guard in shifts. Taewon, Hyejin, Captain Daeho, and others took positions around Jinho, standing motionless for hours. It was the least they could do, though it felt like nothing compared to what he had done. Nari came every day. She stood apart from the crowds, watching strangers grieve for someone who should have been a stranger to them too, but he wasn't. Somehow Jinho had become everyone's friend, everyone's brother, everyone's reminder of what humans could be. On the 7th day, the formal funeral was held. The Hall of Eternal Champions was packed beyond capacity. Thousands more watched from outside. The ceremony broadcast across Valora Prime and transmitted to Earth and every human colony. Empress Mirai spoke first. She talked about duty and honor, about sacrifice and legacy. She announced a formal treaty between Valora and Earth, signed that morning in Jinho's name. The alliance he had died trying to build would happen. His death had achieved what his life could not. Park Jinho proved that heroism knows no species, Mirai declared. He taught us that the measure of a civilization is not its technology or its longevity, but its willingness to stand between danger and those who cannot protect themselves. Valora has learned this lesson late, but we have learned it well. From this day forward, every year on the anniversary of his death, we will observe the Day of Remembrance. We will honor not just him, but the principles he embodied. Lord Sunwoo spoke next, representing the Valoran nobles who had fought for the alliance. He talked about the first time Jinho fixed a palace system with crude tools and brilliant thinking. He talked about seeing humanity's potential and being dismissed by his peers. He talked about being proven right in the worst possible way. Captain Daeho represented the coalition. He kept his speech simple because Jinho would have wanted that. He talked about an ordinary man who did ordinary things extraordinarily well. About someone who saw problems and fixed them, who saw people in need and helped them, who saw danger and ran toward it instead of away. Jinho never wanted to be a hero, Daeho said. He wanted to be an engineer. He wanted to build things, fix things, make things better, and that's exactly what he did. He built a bridge between our worlds. He fixed our broken first contact. He made the universe better. The fact that it cost his life doesn't diminish his success. It proves it. Yuna spoke last, though she hadn't planned to. She walked to the platform without notes, her young face streaked with tears. My brother used to tell me that the universe is broken, she said, her voice shaking but clear. That nothing works the way it should. That everything is held together with improvisation and hope and stubborn refusal to quit. He said a good engineer sees the broken things and fixes them. Not because it's their job. Not because anyone's watching. But because broken things should be fixed. She looked at Jinho's still form. He saw a broken thing, a princess about to die, and he fixed it the only way he could. With himself. With his body and his life and everything he had. That's who he was. That's who we lost. And I hate it. I hate that the universe took him. But I understand why he did it. because he couldn't not do it. It was who he was. There wasn't a sound in the hall. Thousands of beings stood in absolute silence, united in grief and understanding. The ceremony concluded with Valoran tradition. Singers performed the Requiem of Champions, a piece composed 800 years ago and performed only for the greatest heroes. The harmonies were mathematically perfect, designed to express concepts beyond words: loss and honor, grief and gratitude, the price of heroism and its eternal value. Then came Earth tradition. The human delegation played a recording from Jinho's personal files, discovered among his belongings. It was an old song from Earth, something called "What a Wonderful World." Jinho had listened to it often, apparently, when he needed to remember why the struggles mattered. The contrast between the two pieces was striking. Valoran perfection followed by human simplicity, mathematics followed by emotion. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. Together, the two cultures honored their fallen friend. After the ceremony, they carried Jinho to his final resting place. Not on Valora, as Mirai had offered. His family wanted him on Earth, in the soil of his homeworld, under familiar stars. But they left something behind. A crystal monument in the spot where he fell. A statue carved from the same crystal as T-Part 7. The legacy 50 years passed like water flowing through time. The galaxy changed in ways both subtle and profound, and at the center of those changes was the memory of a man who had died saving someone he barely knew, the human Valoran. Alliance grew from a desperate treaty signed over a corpse into the strongest political and economic force in the sector. What had begun as two civilizations became something new, something greater than the sum of its parts. Joint colonies flourished on worlds neither species could have settled alone. Technology flowed both directions, each culture learning from the other's strengths. Humans taught Valorans about innovation born from necessity. Valorans taught humans the patience that came with long lifespans. Together, they pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Medical advances extended human life expectancy to nearly 200 years. Engineering breakthroughs made Valoran technology more adaptable and robust. Art and music blended in ways that created entirely new forms of expression. The sovereignty's attempted coup had become a cautionary tale taught in schools across both civilizations. How fear and hatred had nearly destroyed everything. How one moment of violence had backfired so completely that it achieved the opposite of its goals. How the blood of a single human had washed away centuries of prejudice. But the real story, the one that mattered, was about Jinho. Children learned his name before they learned history. Human and Valoran kids sat in classrooms together, watching recordings of the Festival of Celestial Light, seeing the moment Jinho ran toward danger instead of away. Teachers explained sacrifice and courage and the idea that true heroism wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and acting anyway. Why did he do it? The children always asked. Because someone needed help, the teachers always answered. And he was someone who helped. It was simple enough for children to understand and profound enough to shape their lives. Entire generations grew up knowing that worth wasn't measured in strength or intelligence or longevity. It was measured in what you did when it mattered most. The Day of Remembrance became the most important holiday in both cultures. Every year on the anniversary of Jinho's death, both humans and Valorans stopped their normal activities. They gathered in public spaces, told stories about sacrifice and kindness, and tried to embody the principles Jinho had died for. It wasn't a sad day anymore, though it had started that way. Over time, it had transformed into a celebration of the best parts of both civilizations. Organizations sprouted up bearing Jinho's name. Hospitals, schools, research stations, charitable foundations. The Jinho Park Academy for Interspecies Cooperation trained diplomats and mediators who worked to bridge gaps between all species, not just humans and Valorans. The graduates wore a crystal pendant bearing his likeness, a reminder of what their work meant. On Valora Prime, the Crystal Gardens had been transformed into a memorial park. The statue of Jinho still stood where he had fallen, but now it was surrounded by walkways and gardens and spaces for quiet reflection. Millions of people visited each year, leaving offerings, taking pictures, standing in the spot where everything had changed. The Radiance platform had been rebuilt exactly as it was, except for one change. Where the ancient throne had stood, there was now a window in the floor. Through it, visitors could see Jinho's statue below, a reminder that sometimes the most important thing a throne could protect was not its occupant, but the principles that made the throne worth protecting. And through all of this, for 50 years, Queen Nari kept her promise. She had ascended to the throne 15 years earlier when Empress Mirai abdicated, passing leadership to a daughter who had been transformed by watching a human die. Nari's reign was marked by a wisdom that blended Valoran tradition with human pragmatism. She ruled with compassion, with courage, with an understanding that perfection was less important than progress. She never married. This was unusual for Valoran royalty, and many asked why. She never gave a direct answer, but those close to her understood. She had devoted her life to honoring Jinho's sacrifice, and that devotion left room for little else. Some whispered that she had loved him, though they'd known each other for only 3 weeks. Others said it wasn't romantic love, but something deeper, something that transcended simple categories. The truth was simpler and more complex than either explanation. Jinho had shown Nari what life could mean beyond duty and tradition. He had cracked open her understanding of the universe, and through that crack, light had poured in. She couldn't love anyone else because she was too busy loving what he had taught her, that every life mattered, that every moment was precious, that the only wealth worth having was the difference you made in others' lives. She visited his statue every year on the Day of Remembrance, always alone at dawn before the crowds arrived. She was 142 years old now, still considered young by Valoran standards, her people expecting centuries more of her rule. But she never forgot the young human who had lived only 32 years and accomplished more than most Valorans did in 10 lifetimes. This year's Day of Remembrance was special. It marked 50 years exactly since Jinho's death, and the celebrations were larger than ever. Dignitaries from across the galaxy had come to Valora Prime. There would be speeches, ceremonies, remembrances. But first Nari wanted her private moment. She stood before the statue in the pre-dawn darkness carrying a cup of coffee. Earth coffee, grown in one of the joint colonies, brewed exactly the way Jinho had taught her half a century ago. She had learned to drink it, though it still tasted bitter. But that bitterness was a reminder, a small daily connection to someone long gone. "Hello, old friend," she said softly, placing the coffee at the statue's base. 50 years today. Can you believe it? Half a century since you decided that a stranger's life was worth your own. She sat on the steps beneath the statue, something she never did when others could see. Queens weren't supposed to sit on the ground like ordinary people. But in this moment, Nari wasn't a queen. She was just someone who missed a friend. "So much has changed," she continued. "The alliance you died for is stronger than ever. Humans and Valorans work together on everything now. We have colonies, research stations, schools where our children learn side by side. We've even started exploring beyond our sector together, finding new worlds, meeting new species." She paused, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there was Earth, a blue marble orbiting a yellow sun. She had visited once 20 years ago to lay flowers on Jinho's grave. His family had been there, his parents old but still strong, his sister Yuna now an accomplished engineer carrying on her brother's legacy. "Your family as well," Nari said. "Yuna runs the main engineering department at the academy now. She's trained hundreds of students, both human and Valoran. She tells them about you constantly, keeps your memory alive in very practical ways. Her children know you through her stories, and they'll tell their children. Your bloodline carries on, and so does your spirit." The sky was beginning to lighten, the orange sun creeping toward the horizon. Soon the crowds would arrive, and Nari would have to be queen again. But for now she was just Nari, a woman talking to a memory. "I've tried to live up to what you taught me," she said. "I hope I've succeeded. Every decision I make, I ask myself what you would do. Not because you were always right, but because you always tried to do right. There's a difference, and I think you understood that better than anyone." She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Taewon approaching. He was an old man now by human standards, though the medical advances meant he was still strong and sharp. He had stayed on Valora Prime after Jinho's death, joining the Alliance security forces. He had protected the legacy with the same dedication he'd once brought to protecting his friend. "Thought I'd find you here," Taewon said, sitting beside her. Protocol didn't matter to him either. "I come every year." "I know. I do too, just later in the day." He looked up at the statue. "Still can't believe it's been 50 years. Feels like yesterday sometimes. Other times feels like forever ago. Time is strange that way." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had been there when everything changed. Eventually, Taewon spoke again. You know what I think about most? Not the big moment, not the fall. I think about the week before. How he kept saying something felt wrong, how he worried about security gaps, how he saw what was coming and nobody listened. He was always watching, Nari said. Always thinking. Always ready to fix what was broken. Yeah. And when the moment came, he didn't hesitate. Not for a second. That's what gets me. No thought, no calculation, just action. Like it was the only possible response. Perhaps for him it was. The sun broke over the horizon, flooding the gardens with orange light. In the distance, they could hear the crowds beginning to gather. Soon there would be ceremonies and speeches. Politicians would invoke Jinho's name while pursuing their agendas. Corporations would use his image in advertisements. The day would become about everything except what it should be about, but for now in this quiet moment it was still pure. Still true.